Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show. I'm your host, Josh Kalb, joined by my co-hosts, Bryan Bauer and Noah Miller. We are in Midway Café in Fort Thomas. A special thanks to them for letting us use the restaurant for the show. Our special guest is former NKU men's basketball player Cole Murray. Ranks 5th all-time in three-pointers made at 259, 13th all-time in three-point percentage at 41.1, and earning NKU's first ever Horizon League Player of the Week in the 2015-2016 season. And as you can tell, this is a great player. And Cole, thanks for being on with us.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Excited.
And would you mind just start by telling us about what your life was like, where you're from, and just before you came to NKU?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Delphi, Indiana. It's a really small town about 15 minutes outside northeast of Lafayette, Indiana. Baseball, I was talking to him earlier today, my favorite sport growing up. I loved it. It was all about it. And then in high school, started to progress a little more toward basketball, started to get a little better. I hit a growth spurt. And so outside of that, I got a lot of recognition at the D2 level when I was a junior. Started to progress a little bit and blew up my junior year, going into my senior year of high school. Got a lot of offers. NKU was actually my first Division I offer, and so it's funny how the first one I got, I never thought that I would actually commit to the first school that did offer me. But outside of that, I saw NKU right away as a place I'd want to be. The area was awesome, facilities were great, had great connection with the coaching staff, but overall really excited to make that decision.
And how far did you live from NKU?
So originally Delphi is about 3.5 hours north. Yep, north of Indy.
The time wasn't a factor in that, or
yes.
Did you try to look for somewhere closer?
I did, yeah. So I had 11 offers, and NKU was definitely the closest one. I have a really good relationship with my parents and my family. I have a lot of immediate family up in the Indianapolis and Lafayette area, and so going someplace where they could watch me play a lot was really important to me. And so NKU being the closest one obviously played a factor into it. But outside of that, I wasn't going to go somewhere just because it was close. It had to be the overall best fit for me, not even just athletically, but academically as well. And it checked off every box I was looking for in the school.
And you actually played under 2 head coaches at NKU, correct?
Yeah.
And so what was you were recruited by a different coach, and then later on finishing your career under a different coach. So what was that change like?
Yeah, change probably really best describes my overall college experience. Like you just said, 2 head coaches. I think me and a couple of my former teammates went and calculated it back up. It was like 17 different assistant coaches. We had 2 athletic directors, 2 presidents, a court change, a brand change. So I had to be able to be really fluid with a bunch of the situations. But just the 2 head coaches specifically, I mean, obviously committed to Dave Beazold right out of high school. Loved everything about that staff. Had really good relationships, and still do with a couple of those assistant coaches that recruited me out of high school. But obviously, as things progress at the Division I level, as a new up and coming school, changes get made that you can't really do anything about as a player. You kind of got to roll with them. And when Coach Beazold got fired after my sophomore year, it was a lot of uncertainty for a lot of guys because it's all that we knew. That's who we committed to. That's who we wanted to play for. That's who we thought we were going to be playing for 4 years. Then obviously Coach Brandon comes in, and I mean, what a different change that was, bringing in a guy that had never been a head coach before anywhere, but he had the pedigree of being at a bunch of big time schools under a bunch of really good coaches. So we knew what we were getting. We knew we were getting a really credible, smart, great basketball minded guy. And him changing that culture right away was really important to the sustained success we've seen right now.
So besides NKU, did you have any other D1 offers? Because you mentioned that you had a lot of D2 offers, but was NKU your only D1 offer?
No, so I had 11 Division I offers. Furman, Kent State, Akron, USC Upstate, Gardner-Webb, Boston, Northeastern, a bunch of those type of schools. Kent State, ironically, we just played them. It was between Kent State and Northern Kentucky for my final 2, but just having the connection that I had with the coaching staff at NKU, and the facilities were great. I mean, the facilities that I thought coming in out of every school that recruited me, every visit that I took, I mean, there were schools that had been Division I for 45, 50 years that I went and visited, and then came here and we'd only been Division I for 1 year, and I was like, this is night and day. And so a lot of that played into it, but yeah, the recruiting process is very hectic.
And so now you live around the area. originally not being from around the area. So your great experience with NKU, does that still impact your decision to stay around here?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest things that when I graduated, I looked at was job market. And so being from a really small rural town up in Delphi, Indiana, although we have Lafayette right there, so you have Purdue University and everything, it's a nice area. But down here, the one thing I really connected with right away was that you're 15 minutes away from Cincinnati. So you have a major city right there, but I always felt like I got a small town, local feel being on the Northern Kentucky side. And I made a lot of really good connections through the school. A lot of the coaches that still live around here, my former teammates that are from here, and then season ticket holders and donors. A lot of the people that I met through here, it really grabbed me a hold of it and wanted me to stay here. And I really appreciate that. Being from outside of Northern Kentucky, I know, and now knowing what Northern Kentucky's like, you guys are very close-knit, like to stick together, and it's something I really gravitated to right away.
What's your biggest or your most remembered memory from being on the team?
It's without a doubt winning the championship in 2017. That year was so special to me because there was a lot of moving parts. We brought in 5 outstanding freshmen at the beginning of that year. I battled an ankle injury all preseason leading up into that, so really uncertain what my role was going to look like coming in with a bunch of talent. But for that season to kind of start out the way that it did, it started out a little rocky. We kind of found our stride midway through the year, and then at the end of the year, we dropped our last 3 heading into the conference tournament. And I remember we were all sitting in the locker room and we'd heard rumors about playing in the CIT or the CBI and a bunch of that stuff. And spring break was coming up and we were all like, man, I'd rather go on spring break rather than playing one of those. And I remember Levon Holland peeks his head up out of his locker and he goes, why don't we just win it? And we all were like, what do you mean, win what? And he's like, why don't we just win the conference tournament and go to the tournament? And at that point, everyone was kind of like, yeah, that's still on the table, right? And so obviously the way that whole tournament shakes out, we play the last game of the first round on a Wednesday or Thursday, and we get up there and the number 1 seed Oakland loses, number 2 seed Valpo loses, and all of a sudden we're the highest remaining seed left in it, and we were like, oh my gosh, now we just can't screw up. But the way that whole year shook out, and then obviously winning it and going to play Kentucky in Indianapolis, which is 40 minutes from where I was from, was just an awesome way to cap it off.
The Kentucky game, did you get starstruck at all with the athletes that Kentucky had, like Fox and Mock and Bam?
Yeah, ironically, that's probably the most popular question that I get around that game is centered around the other players out there for Kentucky. And I'll say, I was never nervous at all during that game leading up to it. It was really surreal actually, where walking out of the tunnel, running out there for the first warm-ups an hour before the game, you obviously had the game before us, which is Wichita State, and I forget who else. I remember Wichita State won because they were cheering us on the other end of the floor. But I remember walking out there and just feeling like a peace at mind of we're here, we have nothing to lose. Let's just go out there and have fun and play. I wonder if a lot of it has to do with my first couple of years. I think I was talking to you guys. We played at Kentucky, my second game of my college career. Purdue was my first game of my college career. We went and played North Carolina. We played Wisconsin. We played at West Virginia. So we'd had a lot of exposure to playing high-level teams and players. Obviously, that was the most talented team that I'd ever played against with 3 lottery picks. But no, it wasn't. It was really weird how there was just no nervousness and was not starstruck with those guys, even how great that they are.
Playing a lot of the big games like Purdue and other games you said, did you have a favorite game that you ended up playing or a favorite team that you played against?
I would say that Kentucky team was probably just my favorite overall game. Take into consideration it's in the NCAA tournament. We have Bill Rafferty, Grant Hill, Jim Nance on the call. Legends in the game doing that. You've got Kentucky, Coach Kalb, the 3 lottery picks, close to home for me. Always dreamed of playing in the NCAA tournament myself. So that to me is 100% a standalone game in and of itself. It's above everything. It's not quite close. But I go back to another one when we played at Wisconsin my sophomore year. It was the year they were coming off going to the championship game and get beat by Duke. And they brought everybody back. And I remember being out there on the floor with them, and they rose the banner, they hung the Final Four banner and everything. And to me, that was just a really cool moment to be a part of. And that team was loaded, and we got blown out, obviously. But that was just a really cool game to be part of with the festivities of them going to the Final Four the year before.
And do you have of all the players you mentioned, do you have a player that was the hardest to defend or the hardest to play against?
Man. Julius Randle was probably, just because I had to match up against him in my second career college game, Julius Randle was definitely probably the toughest matchup specifically that I had to play against. I mean, he's an all-star in the NBA now. I mean, he's really good, but that was definitely the toughest matchup for myself.
And what about a teammate that just stuck out with how talented they were, and even just a leader for you all?
A teammate on our team that stuck out? The first couple years that I was there, Tyler White was always a guy that would stick out as a natural leader for us. He would always be leading everything. He would be the first one in drills. He'd be winning every sprint. He would just be really vocal, would be leading us on the defensive end. So he was a guy that really stood out to me in my first couple years. And then after that, my senior year was a really weird team, right? Because we had a bunch of young guys coming in, trying to make an impact. We had Drew, obviously, who's a sophomore, really just starting to ascend into that player that he ultimately becomes. We have Levon, who at the end of that year, he was the best player on the floor at Kentucky, and it wasn't close. I don't care what anybody says. He led us through that charge to the tournament. So we had just a bunch of guys that had no egos, and it was really fun to be around where no one cared who got the credit, no one cared who scored. It was just a collective effort to win. And I think leadership-wise, we all played different roles in that. Matt Rosenwinkel and myself were captains. I'm not an overly vocal guy when it comes to leading. I like to just lead by example and be the comforting force out there on the floor, which I thought I did well. But we had Drew, we had Levon, we had Jordan Garnett, we had Carson. We had a bunch of guys that just led in different ways. So Tyler was the guy that stood out for me at the very beginning, though.
And would you say some of those teams you were on set the expectations for NKU basketball? It's kind of like what we talked about with Drew, how good those teams were that went to the tournament. And so would you say there is an expectation for NKU in the future?
100%. There should be. I mean, I look at it, my junior year was Coach Brandon's first year. We won 9 games. I mean, we weren't very good, but that year laid the foundation for us going forward. It built the culture. It was the system. Everything was put in place in that year, which then helped us carry into, obviously, winning the tournament the next year and making it to the NCAA tournament for the first time. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you have the success that we've had as a program in the first 5-6 years, it's unprecedented. There's not any other program that has transitioned into Division I at the rate that we have. I will say that comes with very hefty expectations. And it comes with a fan base that grows to expect that if we don't make the tournament, it's not a successful year, which is not the case. But I do think it's a good thing that NKU has ascended to that level where we have those expectations, because I would rather have the expectations of making it to the tournament versus, and I hope we win 10 games this year. So I think it's really neat to see how it's really fast-tracked in such a short time.
And I mean, it also brings light to the program. Recruits want to go there because they have expectations to go to the tournament. They get to play in the tournament. So, it's...
Absolutely.
And so we talked to Drew about this, and for the Power 5 conference tournaments, I feel those are interesting because you have all these great teams. But my favorite are the mid-major tournaments. And so what was the atmospheres like for that?
Oh, it was awesome. I mean, it's way different than a Power 5 one where you have multiple bids. Teams aren't playing for their one and only chance to make the NCAA tournament. So I remember my first experience up in Detroit at Joe Louis Arena my junior year to play in the Horizon League tournament. It was just like a really surreal feeling of being there in the conference tournament environment and knowing what comes with that, of carrying the one bid. You win it all, you go to the tournament. Now, we obviously couldn't make the tournament that year because of the probationary period, but just being up there with fans from all different areas. I mean, you even have fans that show up that aren't even there to root for a school. It's just you're having the tournament in their city and they want to come watch basketball. And you get to watch, you get to watch multiple games a day in high pressure environments like that. So, I mean, just the one bid conference tournaments are so special just because of the weight that carries with them.
We always ask about the favorite moments from like Division I players. Are there any regrets that came throughout your basketball career?
No, I think that's probably one of the best things that I can say about my basketball career. Overall, I mean, high school, college, I don't have any regrets about anything. I know that everything happened for a reason, and I'm really at peace with how everything ended. I mean, my college career, like I kind of mentioned with all the changes and everything, there were so many different things that happened that you have no idea you're going to experience as an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid at a school that you just anticipate everything's going to stay the same for 4 years and it's going to be awesome. There's so much stuff that changes with it, and for all of those changes and everything to have ended and culminated and going to the NCAA tournament for me when I knew I only had one chance to make it when I committed there, to me, I don't care what anybody says after that. Like, I'm totally at peace with how everything went.
That's awesome. And following your career, was there any thought of, once you graduated, okay, what am I going to do after this?
Yeah, so obviously, naturally, every college graduate, regardless if you're a student athlete or if you're just a regular student, you have that what's next feeling after you graduate college. You have an idea of what you want to do, but you don't really know until you graduate from it. And I always thought, as every kid growing up and playing basketball or playing sports, oh man, I'm going to be a professional athlete. I'm going to go and play in the NBA, or I'm going to go play in the NFL or the MLB, whatever that is. Obviously, you have to have that self-recognition to know what's real and what's not. And so after leading into my senior year, I remember Coach Brandon and I had a conversation about going and playing overseas. And I was like, at that moment, I was like, yeah, that'd be interesting. I would like to explore that because I didn't know what I wanted to do with a business career. But after we won the tournament, I just said, that's it. I'm ending my college career that way. I don't have the passion, the desire to go play at a professional level over there overseas. I know that requires a lot, and being away from home, being by yourself. I mean, there's just so much stuff that goes into that I was like, I don't have the passion to do it, and I'm probably going to hate it the first month I get over there. So it just took that one conversation. After that, I was ready to get into the business force.
And now with so being a graduate of NKU and having kind of the platform that comes with being a men's basketball player, your job now, is there any impact between the two, or any connection between the two?
1,000%. So every job that I've had, it has been because I've known somebody at NKU, whether it's a season ticket holder or a donor. Somebody in the NKU community assisted and helped me get in front of the right person for a job. So that's one of the biggest things too. Whenever I graduated, I looked at and I said the network with NKU, not even just athletics, but just as the overall university, there's so many different avenues that you can take to get into whatever you want. Like I was telling you, I had no idea that I wanted to get into the job that I'm in now. But just through different connections and everything that NKU offers, I mean, it's an unbelievable network to be a part of.
When it came to like rivalry games, like even leading up to it, did it just feel different than like a normal game? And did you like prepare differently, both mentally and physically, or?
The political answer should be no. Should be that you should treat every game as Coach Brandon would always say all the time. It's a nameless, faceless opponent every time. Obviously, if you're playing Wright State that Saturday, it's probably a little different. I mean, I remember our practices leading up to Oakland and Wright State were always just a little more heightened. There was just a little different edge to the team. We knew how big of a game that it was. Us, Oakland, Wright State are usually at the top of the Horizon League every year. So going into those games, we knew that there was an extra importance on them. But Wright State games, obviously, I mean, those were always fun to be a part of, both here and up there. I mean, love playing up there in that arena, being the villains. But yeah, there's definitely a little extra sense leading into those games.
Yeah, because I always ask people, because I'm like, I want to see if someone's going to finally give me a different answer.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah, there's a little something different.
Yeah, in high school, did you play, because you mentioned that baseball is your favorite sport, did you play baseball in high school, or did you play baseball and basketball in high school, or transition into high school, you made that decision?
Yeah, so it's a really wild story, and I don't think I've really told much of it publicly. I mean, not that I would tell a lot of people publicly about it, but in high school, yeah, I played baseball and basketball all the way up to my junior year. So I actually had my first baseball offer before I got any basketball offers at all. So I pitched in high school, and leading into my junior year of baseball, I got connected with a really good basketball AAU team. So basketball AAU's in the spring, baseball's in the spring, so you kind of have some overlap there. But there were 3 or 4 big tournaments that were going on AAU-wise during the high school baseball season. And I told my high school baseball coach, I said, hey, these are the weekends that we have doubleheaders on or a game. I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to be at them. So pitch me in the middle of the week, pitch me the game after that, like I'm just not going to be there. No problem. That's fine. We'll work it out. So 6 or 7 games into that year, I was playing really well. I was having a really good season. And we had a doubleheader coming up to the first tournament. And my high school baseball coach told me, he goes, hey, man, this isn't going to work out. You're going to have to choose a path. You're either going to go baseball or you're going to go basketball. It's up to you. And I remember leaving there like, what the heck am I going to do? Like, at that point, I didn't have any big basketball offers. I had one Division I baseball offer, so I was like, man, baseball my path. But I was also really liking basketball and really diving into it at that time. So my family and I had a really tough conversation, and my dad was not happy with the way some of the things were handled, obviously. But that decision ended up coming out to where basketball was probably my future. Probably had a better path going that way. So I had to go turn in my jersey that Monday in baseball, and I never played baseball since then.
Yeah, that's not an easy conversation to have at a junior in high school. Like you still have your senior year, so that's like a tough conversation to have.
And our baseball team went to the state championship that year, and I was not a part of it. So,
Well, you made the better choice long term.
Like I said at the beginning, like regrets or anything, the way that anything athletically has ended up for me, no problems with it.
And so with the baseball and basketball, were there any other sports that kind of ever entered your mind about playing? Or
No, I was honestly baseball and basketball my entire life growing up. I think I played football 1 year in 6th grade. Not for me. I mean, you guys watched me play basketball. I think you can see some highlights. I was not a physical guy. Get me on the 3-point line. That's it. Outside of that, not much good.
So is that your favorite area of the game? More offense?
1,000%. Oh, absolutely. 3's worth more than 2, right? Come on, it's math.
Yeah, the stats prove it here. 5th all-time in 3-pointers and 13th all-time percentage. And as I mentioned about the Horizon League Player of the Week, did that accolade stand out to you that you're the first one ever?
Yeah, I honest to God didn't even know that was a thing until the next week when it came out, and they just announced that I was the Player of the Week, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I remember our communication guy saying, hey, man, you were the first one. And I was like, sweet, no idea. But, yeah, I mean, stuff like that. I mean, I think Drew would probably say a lot of the same things when it comes to the accolades and stuff. Nobody that I played with or that were on those key teams ever worried about anything that happened because of that. I think everything that happened individually to a lot of players on those teams happened because of how unselfish everybody was and how the culture was built of just wanting to move NKU as a program to the next level and leave the program better than what you found it the year before. So I think it's one of those things that just goes to show if you put your focus on a lot of those things collectively, the individual success will take care of itself. So,
was there ever a game where you just that you remember that you were just going off from the 3, like 10 for 10 from the 3, you weren't missing, and you were like, feed me the ball, I'm hot, let's go, I'm gonna go down and make a 3? Was there ever a game like that?
Yeah, luckily there were quite a few that happened that way, but there were also a lot that I went 1 for 9 and 2 for 9 and stuff like that. But yeah, the ones that really stayed out to me, and it's funny because a bunch of my friends and I have a running joke that Detroit's place up there was called Callahan Hall, and after I played in there the first 2, my junior and senior year, we have a running joke that's Murray Hall because I was 14 of 22 from 3 in 2 games up there. So those games up there I vividly remember where it was like, just throw it to me. Like, I don't care where I'm at. I mean, again, like, talk about the team being so unselfish. I remember everybody. I'd run down the floor and be in the corner, and whoever's on the floor would be like, hey, come on, I got a screen for you, like trying to get me the ball and get open. So I'd be like, okay, I'll get one up. You don't have to beg me to get one up, that's for sure. But yeah, those were 2 games that definitely stand out about that.
With quitting baseball, did that put any pressure to make you maybe a better basketball player? Because you thought, well, this is it, I have to succeed in this. Did it affect that at all?
Yeah, I don't know if it was definitely like a pressure thing to myself where it's like, okay, I chose this route, I have to make it and I have to go to college. It was one of those things where I had the confidence that the people around me, my high school basketball coach, Michael Lewis, he was so influential on me when it comes to how serious to take basketball, getting into AAU, being in the gym, and as a high school kid at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, calling him saying, hey, I want to get shots up, I want to go to the weight room, I want to just help me out, get better. What do I got to do? So I don't think there was just so much added pressure of like, oh my gosh, this is it, got to make it work. More so of personally, I wanted it to be that. I wanted to go to the college level and play and have a chance to play big games at Kentucky and Purdue and North Carolina. I wanted to be a part of that. So I think that drove me more so than just putting the pressure on myself of like, man, this is last ditch effort. You got to make it work.
Talking about the whole 3-point game and everything, but we see it more now than ever in basketball. Like just more people making plays around 3-point shooters and around 3-pointers, more 3-pointers going up. And for 3-point shooters today, would you say it's more of a mental game? Like even if you miss a couple, just keep shooting.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things with being a shooter in general is you have to have no conscience. Like you have to be comfortable every chance you get the ball and you have a decent look. You have to be ready to pull the trigger. And I think a lot of people that I played with would say that I did not have a conscience, and they said he would let it rip whenever he was 0 for 10. That 11th one was 1,000% going up, just as if I was 7 for 7 at that time. But it is interesting now seeing basketball as a whole, NBA and college, gravitating toward the 3-point line, just because I think there's a lot of analytics that goes into it now. Getting a wide open 3 for a 40% 3-point shooter and having a 60% post player shooting a hook shot, the numbers just work out now where a lot of people are favoring the 3. But yeah, being a shooter in general, if you want to be really, really good at it, I just think you have to have that unconscious mentality that whenever you got to look, you got to be comfortable putting it up.
I want to ask you about today and the way college basketball is today. I'll start with the NIL. I'm sure you would have really appreciated being involved in that at the time. But is that something you were for from the perspective of a college athlete?
Yeah, obviously I understand how slippery of a slope that is when it comes to paying college athletes as a whole, because the quarterback at a certain big-time Power 5 school versus the ninth man on a low to mid-major basketball team are two totally separate entities, and there's no way you can fairly compensate both of those players. However, I do absolutely believe that with the NIL, it's something that should be taking place, just because people ask me all the time about my experience playing college basketball. They're like, oh my gosh, that had to be so awesome. And while it was awesome. I don't trade any of the memories that I had, meeting the people that I met, the games I got to be a part of, the road trips, the camaraderie, all of that stuff is awesome. I mean, I'm from 3.5 hours away from my hometown. I went to Christmas twice in 4 years, and it was just for Christmas. I had to be there. I got in there Christmas Eve, spent Christmas morning with my family, and then I left to go to practice, drive 3.5 hours back for practice that night. I miss Thanksgiving every year. There's just so much stuff that goes into it. I mean, you're at school for 11 months out of the year. You only have 2-3 week breaks to go home or do whatever when school ends and the 3 weeks before school starts. So with how much time you're investing and spending there, I do think you have to be compensated in some way for that. But even more so, the NCAA as a whole makes so much money off of their college athletes that it's kind of odd that the people that are putting in the effort and producing the product on the floor or the field or whatever that is that people are buying in to watch, you tell me they don't get any piece of that whatsoever. So I do think the NIL is a really good way to compensate those players now.
There's just so many sides to it.
Yeah.
It's just, and of course, athletes are going to look at it at a different perspective because they get paid from it, and why wouldn't you?
Well, and I remember, and that's a good point. I remember one time when I was a senior, there's a class that I was doing, and you had to write a report about some topic that meant a lot to you or that needs to be more attention brought to it. And at that time, I think Jay Billis was really pushing for paying of players and stuff like that. So I wrote a paper on it from an athlete's side of what I was going through at the time. But I remember multiple times in that class when I had to give my presentation about it. When I sat back down, there were students that said, well, don't you get a free education? Like, you are being paid. Yes, you are. You're 1,000% getting a free education. And when you graduate college, not having that debt there, I mean, I'm not going to mince words to anybody saying that doesn't provide any value, because it obviously does. But like, you don't see any money when you're in the moment and you're there practicing every day or lifting every day and going to class and study hall. Like, I'm not getting compensated in that way. It's not like I get to go and spend money at the mall or get to go do. I don't have.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was always a big topic.
Yeah, and like you said, you lost your holidays, and those are worth a lot. Those memories and family, you know.
Yeah, and I was lucky. I mean, being 3 or 3.5 hours away, I could drive up there and pull a 6-hour day of driving just to see my family for 8 to 12 hours. I mean, we had people on my team that were from different states that just said, "Well, I'm spending Christmas at home in their dorm room." Like people don't realize all that stuff that go into it.
Yeah, that takes a toll. I mean, during like COVID, when college basketball started back up, these guys didn't get to be around the team like they would.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and do you all have any more questions?
No.
I just want to thank you again for coming on. NKU men's basketball, Norse, another legend. We've already been with one legend, there's another one right here.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And huge thanks to Midway Café for letting us come in and use their restaurant to do the show. It's our first remote location, and so come here, get a bite to eat. They have some great food.
Wings are phenomenal.
And from our crew behind the scenes on the camera, Gracie Holland, and our audio guys, Seth Jackson and Brady Kramer, and of course, Mr. Wes Akers. Obviously, this wouldn't be able to happen without us, even though he isn't here. But he does a lot for us. From Cole Murray, Noah Miller, Bryan Bauer, and myself, Josh Kalb, this has been the NKU Sports Talk Radio Show.